Hey guys, Zero here, and today I'd like to go over rune choices for Kha'Zix Top. For those of you who don't know me, I am a Masters Kha'Zix Top one-trick, and I have over 3,000 games playing Kha'Zix Top. First, let's go over Keystones. For each Keystone, I've given a ranking out of 10 for their ability to burst, poke, have sustained damage, and overall utility. For Arcane Comet, which is my personal favorite, it scores a 7 for burst, 10 for poke, 7 for sustained damage, and 0 for utility. One thing to note while going over this is that most of these runes are taken into consideration for laning. Early levels, Arcane Comet has the same amount of damage as Electrocute. Electrocute starts to scale higher than Arcane Comet, and for sustained damage, a lot of times when you are in a longer fight, you'll be able to get off multiple procs of Arcane Comet, thus having it score decently high in sustained damage. For First Strike, it gets a 5 for burst, 7 for poke, 3 for sustained damage, and a 5 for utility due to the gold that it gives. For Electrocute, it scores a 10 on burst, a 0 for poke, a 4 for sustained damage, and a 0 for utility. Conqueror scores a 3 for burst, 0 for poke, 10 for sustained damage, and a 1 for utility for the small amount of healing you can sometimes get out of it. Phase Rush has scored a 0 in all categories due to the fact that it does not do damage, except for utility, where it has scored a 10 out of 10. Dark Harvest scores a 5 for burst, 4 for poke, 2 for sustained damage, and 0 for utility. And finally, Grasp of the Undying scores a 5 for burst, a 0 for poke, an 8 for sustained damage, and a 2 for utility for the small amount of healing and bonus health increase. So now that we have our scores for each of these runes in their individual categories, to get an overall performance score, I have given a relative importance to each of these categories. This relative importance may change for you based on how you play Kha'Zix and the matchup that you're in, though this is what I would generally give for each of these runes in most situations that I end up in due to how I play. Burst has a relative importance of 9, Poke has 7, Sustained Damage has 4, and Utility has 11. With these, we can multiply the relative importance by the score in that individual category to get overall performance scores for each Keystone. Something like this can be done for any champion with any rune set, though you would have to come up with the relative importance and the score for each of them on your own. So, the overall performance by each rune looks like this. Arcane Comet and First Strike have come out on top with 161 for both. Phase Rush, Electrocute, and Grasp of the Undying came generally around the same place, with Conqueror and Dark Harvest not looking like contenders. I will say though that there are situations where each of these runes could be the optimal rune due to your playstyle and matchup that you're in. Grasp of the Undying is a good example of an extremely strong laning rune that happens to fall off extremely hard. So in some scenarios, you might want to test around with that and Ignite to try to dominate a lane. Phase Rush can also be much more valuable based off of preference, as playstyle will impact that very much. Now that we've gone over the Keystones, let's go over some minor runes. In my opinion, some of the strongest minor runes are Taste of Blood for the massive healing that you can get out of it, Sudden Impact for the lethality, Ghost Poro, since it gives base AD once it's completed, and it gives you a lot more warding ability. Ingenious Hunter is extremely valuable due to the fact that it lowers cooldown on not only your ward, but also your mythic, whatever you choose it to be. If you're running Eclipse, this gets the cooldown for Eclipse down to 3 or 4 seconds, depending on how many stacks you have and whether or not you're running Cosmic Insight. Mana Flow Band is good for if you're looking to max W and poke out more, which is something that I often do. Transcendence is another one for a poke playstyle, since it gives ability haste and an additional ability haste cooldown thing on kills. Scorch can also be considered for poke since it does add damage to your W poke, and Gathering Storm is generally a good rune if you're looking to scale for late game. Second Wind is an extremely effective rune, especially when paired with Taste of Blood versus champions who have damage over times. The healing that you can get out of those two runes can be extremely substantial in certain lanes. Magical Footwear is good for free 300 gold plus the additional movement speed it gives. Minion Dematerializer can be nice if you're looking to one-shot backline minions with your W, or go for a full wave clear build with Ravenous Hydra. Biscuits are extremely good for laning, especially when you're looking to bait and or take an extremely strong fight where that 10% missing health will add up to be a lot. Cosmic Insight is also generally a good rune to have. Now that we've gone over all the individual runes, I'd like to go over a few of the pages that I like to run. The first page, as you'll see with a couple of the other pages, uses Ingenious Hunter and Ghostporo as the secondary runes chosen from the other tree. These two combined give you an extreme amount of warding that you otherwise wouldn't have. Another thing to note is that versus a champion like Evelyn, the Ghostporo is actually able to spot the champion even if they're camouflaged, so that can be extremely useful there. Additionally, once you get your Mythic, Ingenious Hunter is extremely strong since it will allow you to utilize your Mythic's active and or passive much more often. Here is somewhat of a wave clear rune page. This is for when I want to just sit back and press W all game long. I take minion dematerializer so that I can one-shot either the backline minions or fully clear the entire wave with Ravenous Hydra. It is to be noted that the front lines will not die with a single W, but one auto attack and a Q will just about do it on the front lines. Here's the rune page that I have been running quite a bit recently, which would be my first strike rune page. And this is my early 1v1 Comet rune page. Comet tends to be the best in laning phase aside from Grasp, and the Taste of Blood plus Scorch gives you quite a bit of effective skirmish ability early on. I would run this for many matchups where I either need to survive or is very close, and having those few extra points of damage and healing make the difference. Thanks for watching. I'm planning on making a guide for First Strike Kha'Zix Top in the near future. If you'd like to see that, leave a like and comment down below. I was also considering updating my Arcane Comet guide. I had made this a few years ago in collaboration with Kha'Zix mains. If you'd like to see that as well, let me know in the comments down below. Until next time, so long!